Welcome, everybody. We have Dutch Van Meijl here from Bushels Plus, and he's going to do his presentation, so you can take it over there, Dutch.
Alrighty, yeah. So thank you for the introduction. So as I said, my name is I go by Dutch, and I am the account manager at Bushel Plus. And we're going to be talking today about precision harvest. So why measuring your harvest loss can be your biggest advantage. So like I said, well, my actual name is Chris, but I go by Dutch. I'm the accounts manager here. I grew up on about 1,000-acre grain farm, half an hour north of Brandon, Manitoba. I still farm that same farm with my dad and my older brother. So I not only am I selling the Bushel Plus, I am an active user of the system, and I personally thoroughly enjoy the system even without working here. So going into the agenda for this, so we're going to start with comparing sort of the mindset or the approach that companies and farmers have taken in regards to seeding versus harvesting, why the loss measurement is important, and using the Bushel Plus app as sort of a toolbox, and how the whole system can really help farmers with their operation. So going into the first slide here, so precision seeding versus precision harvest. So over the last few decades, a lot of focus has been placed on maximizing a crop's potential growth. Varieties, with vastly improved yield potential, disease resistance, basically the whole agronomic package, have allowed farmers to grow increasingly larger crops. Every aspect of the growing cycle has been scrutinized, and solutions have been offered to ensure that the crop reaches that potential. Things like seed selection, placement, fertility, seed bed preparation, disease management, pest control, growth regulation, residue management, all of these have been factored into the equation, and various companies have designed solutions and offered those to growers over the years. All of that is in an attempt to gain, those last few extra bushels, which quite often is the main sort of dividing line between a farm being profitable and not, as well as just increasing farm production. And every spring, farmers calibrate their seeders and their planters to make sure that they are putting the precise amount of seed and fertilizer into the ground. No successful farmer just pulls his seeder out, throws everything in, and starts going. That's a very quick way to lose a lot of money. So obviously, every seeder and every grower has their calibration procedure. Whether it's a hand crank and buckets, or if it's the new electronically controlled metering systems. Growers do these things so that they know and can control for their seeding costs, to help make sure that they're profitable. And so over the years, seeding has become incredibly precise. Harvest, on the other hand, has really lagged behind in the precision department. Manufacturers and growers have focused more on combine throughput, so using more and more horsepower to thrash as much material as possible, chewing through acres at increasingly impressive rates. However, the cleaning area of combines often has not kept pace with the additional horsepower that farmers have at their disposal. So loss monitors were developed in the 1980s, and while the monitors that display the results have greatly improved, the sensors themselves have largely stayed the same. So you have this combination of, a little bit smaller cleaning capacity compared to the increased horsepower, with a largely stagnant sort of sector in the sensors that they're using. So over the years, farmers have attempted to find ways to determine what their losses were. Everyone's probably tried them, whether it's a square foot check on the ground, dropping screens, running beside the combine with a shovel. Everyone has their own method, a lot of which were very dusty and dirty, and quite often quite dangerous. Many growers, sort of as yield monitors and loss monitors became more advanced looking, a lot of growers simply started to trust the loss monitor and just kind of left it at that. They didn't really bother to sort of ground truth what was happening. A lot of these methods are time consuming and often highly inaccurate, and this is where the Bushel Plus system comes in. So going into this, what does harvest loss look like? Depending on the crop you're in, it can sometimes be quite drastic. So this picture was taken at a field just east of Brandon, Manitoba. This was about a month and a half after canola the canola been harvested, and as you can tell, there is a lot on the ground. You know, and you spend a lot of time growing it, so why wouldn't you want to catch all of it? So obviously this is quite drastic. And how bad can loss be? So the question often is, well, that picture that came before, how much was that? Like what kind of bushels per acre are we actually looking at? Easily guys are losing 1 to 2 bushels an acre with no trouble, without even realizing it. Commonly it's 2 to 5 bushels an acre, and worst case scenarios that we've seen 5 to 15 bushels an acre. And while I'm sure everyone here kind of thinks, well, that's I have a neighbor who's that bad, but I'm not that bad. It's amazing just how what you think looks good on the ground, how bad it can actually be. So the main thing is, if we don't apply calibrations to the combines, then it can very quickly look as bad as this. And especially if you're rushing, if you're trying to beat the weather, if you're not properly calibrated, it can spike very quickly. This picture here is 10 bushels an acre, but I'm pretty sure if you were to count that, you'd think it'd be way higher. So what does harvest loss actually cost? What are the real effects of it? So we base this on Saskatchewan. So in Saskatchewan, there's roughly 33 million acres of grain harvested per year. Saskatchewan as a province as a whole produces about 1 billion plus bushels of crop. So per combine, about 2,500 acres. So there's just over 13,000 combines roughly in Saskatchewan. If every one of those was unadjusted, each harvests about 76,000 bushels. If we could increase or reduce, I guess, the yield loss, or so increase your yield by even just 1 bushel per acre, that's an additional 33 million bushels. So at an average of $7 per bushel, I mean, obviously this year is a little extreme with canola being the prices that they are, well, all crops being very high price this year, but at an average of $7 a bushel, that's $231 million of lost revenue, which obviously is not nothing. And these numbers, come from both PAMI and the Canola Council, so these are well funded and thorough organizations. So why loss measurements are important? Obviously, I just gave the example there. However, it seems to be sort of a global thing. There was the harvest loss program run out of Western Australia, which lost an estimated $98 million of canola. The University of Manitoba by Rob Golden in 2012 did a 3-year research canola harvest loss study. In 310 fields, the losses ranged from anywhere from 2.3 to over 11%. So 2.3 being the low end just shows you that that's, as one of the previous slides shows, that's still a bushel and a half, 2 bushels per acre. PAMI has also done extensive research in the field for this. There's also been precision planting research in the USA on corn and soybeans, and all of these studies have one thing in common, and that thing is that you can only manage what you see. Accidentally, sorry, click through that a little fast, but yeah, so you can only manage what you measure. So what we hear for most growers is that I don't need a pan for cereals or pulses. They're easy enough to check the ground for it. I can see the kernels on the ground. I know there's not many, so I'm feeling comfortable with it. Or the one that we get a lot now is, well, my new combine is self-adjusting. I don't need a pan. It calibrates itself. It keeps its losses at a minimal on its own. What we actually end up seeing is that it can be quite an eye-opening experience for growers to really see what they're actually losing. One farmer that we spoke to said, we checked beside the pan, and just by looking on the ground, it looked not too bad, and we would have kept harvesting in the past. But when we measured with the pan, their losses were over 5%. Which is obviously quite jarring. And so they then reduced that down to 1% loss. So they now focus more on dollars lost per hour as opposed to acres per hour done. Then what we see is with the pan, you'll find the smaller and broken kernels, which you wouldn't normally have factored in. I mean, a lot of that just kind of gets lost, especially the cracked ones if you're in a real dry harvesting area. Quite often those fall down in the soil cracks and you never even know that they're there. And so this helps keep those losses in check as well. And finally, loss sensors are only as useful are only useful when they are properly calibrated. Sorry. So while newer machines are self-adjusting, they do have the ability to adjust on the fly, they still rely on the same basic sensor technology that was developed over 30 years ago. As I mentioned earlier, sensors haven't really changed. It's still just a plate where things knock against it and it measures that. And sensors need to be properly calibrated to ensure that they are accurate in the data that they are recording. If you're giving a self-adjusting combine bad data, it will give you bad results. And if you don't ground truth it, you'll never know that's the case. So the vision at Bushel Plus has been to make farmers more profitable and keep them safe while they're checking for their losses. We do that in a number of ways, which we'll go through here. So it doesn't matter at Bushel Plus. We don't care what color or age of machine you run. From new to old, combines need to be calibrated so that you have a benchmark of how much is actually going out the back. Like I said, loss monitors need calibrated sensors, so that way if the display shows you what your losses are, you have a more accurate picture of what, an increase on that loss monitor, what does that actually equal out to? And like I said, self-setting combines are only as good as the sensors they rely on. The automatic harvest function needs these sensors to work their magic. If a bad sensor, is in use, quite often the combine can slow down or speed up, and you'd never know. We've had growers who were running two of the exact same combines, and one was running about 1.5 miles per hour slower, even though it was the exact same conditions. And it was only once they checked the losses with the Bushel Plus while manually going faster, that's when they realized that it wasn't losing more, there was just a bad sensor. And if they hadn't done that, they would have missed out on potentially acres and acres of harvest, just because the machine was running slower. And so it can definitely help make you more efficient. So the system is, so we have the Bushel Plus pan. So it is a remote controlled, magnetically mounted system. So it works on multiple machines. There's no wiring to run. There's nothing to connect. It's entirely self-contained. So like I said, there's no wiring to connect, nothing like that. It is remote controlled, so that way you don't have to, there's no system, there's no wires you have to run. It's a wireless remote, which also helps keep you safe. There's 2 drop pan options, a wide and a narrow pan, for different stubble conditions. One key factor in it is also that it's a covered design. So you can see here in this picture, there's a lot of material sitting on top of that cover. And if you don't properly account for that, that'll fill the pan as you're getting up to speed for your test, and that can skew your results if you don't keep that clean. And so, then you're getting bad data, and bad data is just as useless as no data at all. Then we move on to the air separator. So this is what really helps make the system as efficient as it can be. So it gives you fast sample cleaning. So essentially what you do is you dump your entire contents of the pan into the top. It's a variable speed system. It's battery powered. And so you slowly increase the speed while sifting through it, and it'll blow all the straw and the chaff, and and everything out, while the heavier grain settles to the bottom and is caught by the screen located at the midpoint of the fan. So this is what that looks like in action. So as you can tell, there's his hand is over the top to stop it all blowing out at once. But as you can see, all of your small chaff comes out. And because it's variable speed, it is usable in almost all sizes of grain. So anything from the small grains like canola and flax all the way up to soybeans and corn. Because you can set that dial very precisely, you don't have to worry about everything blowing out, and losing your sample. And then the third portion of our system is the app. So this is where sort of the real magic happens. So there's a lot of innovative features on it. So it has the calculations for the grain loss, so that way you're not having to sit there and look at charts. There's also a performance monitor, so that way you can really dial into and get a sense of, okay, this is how much per acre I'm losing. This is how many hours, how many dollars per hour I'm losing. Inside the app, you can save your machine settings and your results. So you can either share that with someone, with another operator, or use it for next year if you're in similar conditions. And then we also have the ability to drop the pan, to control the pan with the Wi-Fi pan control option. So that way, if you ever lose your remotes, or if you just prefer to not have to carry them around, then this gives you that option as well. So here's what some of the calculation screens look like. So on the left, the first one, that is your loss calculator. So this is where you can choose your pre-populated crops. I believe there's well over a dozen at this point. You also enter the width of your cut, the width of your spread pattern. So that's how far your straw is being spread, whether that's spreading or dropping in the windrow. Your pan size, as well as the weight of the sample that was in your air separator, which you weigh with the included scale. Then the second picture is your performance monitor. So this is where, if you know your yields, so your bushels per acre, and you know the price, you can put in what your combine capacity is in either acres per hour or bushels per hour, and it will tell you what your losses are as a percentage of either your loss or as a dollar per acre what you're losing, or per hour. This is where a lot of guys really kind of see, oh, well, it's not just half a bushel, it's $25 an hour, or $200 an hour, however fast you're going. So that's what really can help drive home what the losses are costing. Then the last part, and sort of one of the most recent features, and the one that a lot of guys are really starting to see the benefit of, is to save your data. So the screen on the right, screenshot on the right, shows you, so you can even put what variety you're in, what speed you're going, what your concave settings are, what your sieve settings are. You can take a photo, so that way if you want to just take a photo of what your monitor shows, then this gives you the option to do all that, and all of that is saved locally on the device and can be shared or exported to a computer when you plug it in, or it can be shared as a message to other operators. And that way, if you're running multiple combines with the same make and model, this provides a good starting point. Now, I'd mentioned with the width of the spread pattern, whether it was spreading or dropping. So our system allows, because of the way our calculations are done, we allow for both. So this is a short half hour, so I don't want to get too bogged down, but if there are questions, obviously at the end, feel free to ask them. But yeah, there are two main methods. There's dropping and there's spreading. So you can either drop the straw and collect everything in the pan, or catch just a sample as it's being spread out by your chaff spreader. Not every combine can drop all the straw in the chaff and the windrow easily. Some of the older combines, it's quite a process to do that. And so this gives you the flexibility to do either or. There's also the possibility of your losses actually being different, because depending on the make and model of the combine, the straw chopper and the blowers in the back can actually create sort of a vacuum inside the machine. It can alter the wind flow within the combine, which can quite often lead to increased losses of 2 to 3 bushels per acre, or the equivalent of increasing your fan speed by 50 to 100 RPM. But for producers that want to do either or, the app accounts for that with the different calculation settings. So when you choose your calculator, it'll ask you, what are you doing with your sieves? So all of your chaff, are you spreading or are you windrowing it? Then it will ask you, what are you doing with your straw? So are you spreading your straw or are you dropping your straw? Obviously, combines can quite often do a mixture of the two, and this allows you to do either or to really hone in your results. And then once you've selected whether you're spreading or dropping, the app will then ask you, where are you dropping the pan? Are you dropping it off to the side, to check just your straw spread, or to check both, vice versa. So there's quite a few options, and that way you're getting your most accurate results. Now, the sort of the last and the most the part that a lot of guys like to see is, what is the return on investment for this system. So we base this on the average Manitoba farm, which is roughly 2,500 acres. The yield numbers are the 5-year average. Oh, I lost that. The yield numbers are the 5-year averages for the province, taken from MASC yield data. Like I said, it's a 5-year average. Cost and expected prices are taken from the Manitoba Cost of Production Guide Handbook. Obviously, they'll vary a little bit per grower, but these are sort of the provincial averages. As we've already talked about, a 5% increase in yield due to reduced losses is easily within reach for most producers, and that's what this chart shows. So a Bushel Plus system, properly used, will provide a full return on investment in less than 200 acres. There's an average profit increase of $19.76. And again, that's even, not taking into account the fact that this year canola was rapidly creeping up to $23 a bushel. But at a price of $10.50, that's, you're looking at quite a significant profit. So that additional 5% is often the difference between profitability and just breaking even for many crops. So like I said, you can really see here, even in something like oats or barley, which aren't normally considered real profit drivers, you can increase your profit by, $14 to $18 per acre, which can make a huge difference. So yeah, here you can see the system in action in canola, in both straight cut or swath, and it definitely makes a difference. It improves a lot of farmers' operations. It's not just a drop pen; it's a complete system to learn more about your machine at harvest and to help you long term. Reducing your combine losses and your efficiency is never a bad thing. And yeah, so that's kind of the end of it. Also, thank you for listening, and now we'll go and do any questions if you have any.
Okay, I have one here, Dutch. It just says, what are the biggest challenges to calibrating?
So in terms of, I guess there's a few different ways you can approach that. The biggest challenge, I guess, is normally most farmers are in a time crunch. So the idea of having to calibrate your whole system, if there's a rain coming or something. So there's sort of that mental challenge. In terms of mechanical challenges to calibration, as I mentioned earlier, most combines and combine manufacturers have really focused on increasing horsepower without necessarily providing a corresponding increase in cleaning area. And so quite often what we find is that combines can thresh far more than they can clean, especially in smaller grains. And so you're far more likely to overload your sieves before you overload your engine. And so the biggest challenge is just getting the maximum cleaning capacity out of your machine, to kind of match it to the engine that you have. But yeah, that would probably be the biggest challenge. The nice thing with this system is, and I always recommend to guys, when you're doing your calibrations, change one thing and then do another test, and then change another thing and do another test. That way you really start to figure out, okay, well, it's usually my sieves that are aren't opened wide enough, or it's usually my fan that is running too fast. And that really helps you start diagnosing what your combine's doing.
Okay. And what's the biggest obstacle for farmers developing this type of technology?
So I guess the biggest obstacle for farmers with this technology is like I said, a lot of it's mental and just in believing that they need it or that they have the time to use it. I'll be honest, it can take an hour or two to really get your combine dialed in, but once you've done it, the nice thing is then you can adjust your loss monitor to match what is showing up on the ground, and then you can actually trust your loss monitor. So the biggest challenge is getting guys out of that mindset of, oh, well, the combine does it itself, or the loss monitor already tells me everything I need to know. And then some guys, they get a little spooked by the price. But that's always, I always find it kind of strange. Some guys have no problem dropping $6,000 on a leather seat upgrade for their combine, but $3,000 for something that'll make your combine run better. Some guys kind of get a little spoofed by that. But like I said, with the return on investment, it's usually within the first field, the first field or two that it already pays for itself. So those are the main challenges to getting farmers to actually use the system.
Okay, and that just tied into the third question here, which was what was the smallest amount used to get started? I think you mentioned something about I'm going to say 3,000. I'm not sure, but I'll leave that with
Yeah.
you. But
Yeah. So the
you did also
so the
mention, sorry about that,
no,
Dutch.
sorry. Yeah.
You did also mention that they'll see results within the first, few acres, right? They'll see a
Mhm.
difference once they calibrate. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So we always recommend that when you start a new crop, or a new field, that you calibrate, go out there, and most guys will say, oh, well, I'll open the field up and then I'll worry about it. No, get started, because, headlands on a field take up a lot of, headlands or end rows, whatever guys refer to them as, take up a lot of space on a field. It's a big area. And so if you're losing that grain, you're never getting that back. And so
Mhm.
if you get a new field and immediately start calibrating, that way every acre that you harvest is properly calibrated. And the difference between 3 bushels an acre loss and half a bushel an acre loss, even over 10 acres, that's 25 bushels. And at today's prices, that already accounts for several $100s, or potentially a couple $1,000s, quite quickly in profit. And if it's not, if guys think it's not worth taking the time for an hour's worth to make a couple $1,000s more,
Mhm.
then I really wonder what kind of job they'd be willing to work. Because for a few $1,000, if a company said to me, we'll pay you $2,000 an hour, I think I'd be there pretty quickly.
What's a basic maintenance on this, the Bushel Plus?
So maintenance, it's a very self-contained, very reliable system. As long as it's charged fairly regularly, and by regularly I mean the pan, you can get 100 drops on average out of the fan, is usually good for 40 or 50 cleanings. So usually you charge it up at the start of the season, and you might charge it a couple times throughout the year. Store it somewhere that's not wet and cold, and it should run for years. The biggest things we've ever had is we had a couple of charge ports that need to be replaced, and that's really it.
Okay. All right. Well, we've pretty much come to the end of our session. I will post Dutch's email on the screen there. So if you have any questions, you can always chat with him in the networking tab, or you can shoot him a quick email and I will post that right now. So thanks a lot, Dutch. We appreciate it, and
Yep.
enjoy the rest of this precision ag call.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And you can also check out our website, bushelplus.ca. It also has a lot of the information as well on the system. So yeah, I've very much enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.